Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. The title has come to me as Story No More. And so I have, in some sense, extracted a sort of theory on advanced communication for an intelligent living being, which I will share in this talk, but I would also like your attention to go to this concept, and perhaps you can see it as a sort of concept, like a ship, like a distant ship in an unknown sea. Your life, for the idea of you, is primarily a story. When you want to communicate your life, when you want to share your experiences, the manner to do it is through language, through a language of sort. And so one can say that if language is the bridge between the inner and outer reality, what is the value of the outer if there was no inner, and what is the value of the inner if there was no outer? In other words, if we were to wonder about the our if we just experience the mind's presence, and if we experience the body's presence. And I can tell you, when I had, like, I mean, everybody has dreams, but I had a dream where I could consciously move in it. That dream, when I woke up, changed my life. It changed my life because I understood the mind can simulate movement for itself, even when the body is asleep, as if the mind is in a world of its own and the body is a distant echo. I looked at this life and I realized I am coloring it. When I was super young, one of the first activities I remember in my consciousness in this lifetime is that I was drawing a coloring book, and there was like a chicklet, and I was coloring it yellow, and I could even remember how unskilled my hand was, where the lines would go out of the frame of the shape. And so when I kind of got older, I realized, holy shit, I'm coloring my beliefs. I am coloring my perception. I am keeping the world in my attention due to a certain silent abidance. This silent abidance is a suggestion that you are functioning right now, regardless of how people see you, or who you have communicated yourself to be. There is a way of you being which knows its moment in a way that no other moment can experience. That means you two best friends go to a concert and they both jump up and celebrate the concert. Now, are those two friends, when they look at the artist, like on stage, when they look at the concert, are those two friends in the same moment, or are they in two different moments that gaze upon the same world? And so when you realize, holy shit, your mind is how well you were able to wield your attention to unravel the world behind your eyes. For why else are we alive but to engage the designs that are in front of us? When I looked at reality, I was like, okay, free imagination. The world is giving free design. And so a part of this momentary intelligence abides by shape. And the life force has, in some sense, bunkered itself in biology. The inspiration behind man's eyes, because, like, in my known day, like whatever I've experienced so far to this point that I'm giving this talk, it's as if I now wonder at the unknown. After playing the games of life for eons, can we see beyond our eyes the place that was never suggested we look? As if the angry man blamed everybody and was just pointing fingers, until one moment he pointed a finger and he was looking in front of a mirror. And he saw his fault. Advanced communication is a concept or an idea where is that I don't see people like some people look at the spiritual tradition and they're like, okay, these guys are trying to be renunciates. They're taking the ideology super seriously. Okay, I get it. Like, imagine if you just thought that was the only boat your mind could journey on, that belief system. But for me, I have in some sense kind of like pulled off my jacket language and dogma that had stuck with me since my childhood. And you don't understand, sometimes enlightenment is realizing that when the light entered your eyes, novelty was the order of the world, regardless of the chaos. The moment we became as a creature conscious was the moment the world opened its eyes. There was someone to see a world. So for me, this reality is kind of a silly place. And that's why I feel we need to create a global community of great minds, Maybe you should just call it that. The global community of great minds. the the every person is an advanced communicator. What that means in every moment of your life, whether you take this what I'm saying seriously or not, you have been observing how your intelligence is a communication in the moment with a certain design since the beginning. Since any moment you have been in the waking life, in the waking universe, we have in some sense had access to a part of reality, but not the whole picture. And our species' greater evolution is to see more until it finds the origin of sight. Then the journey of a universe back into itself had no end or start. Do you realize that chaos is the allowance and order is the denial? And this universe of abstraction behind our eyes, when we say we have memories, like where those memories exist, in that state of attention and being, how true have you allowed the moment to be? Sometimes I thought in life you gotta do something to change the world. You gotta be a superhero. You gotta go punch some bad guy in the face, and then you've done the world a service. Like that's how the movies are teaching kids their sense of honor and nobility. Rather than to see sometimes mindfulness can be the greatest act the species has perceived, has seen. To not bang the door of civilization shut like a madman, but to gently close the door. To be a species that if our end arrives quicker than we have arrived towards it, then the embrace of the ultimate confrontation of the flow of manifestation will take you. And it will not take you into an idea. You're going to see before your eyes, before your last breath, you're going to also see thought end with that last breath. And when that last breath occurs, you begin to see the seer within now begins to move. Believe it or not, it's this is take this as a thought experiment, I guess. I don't know how you should hear my words, but I'm telling you, it there has been the idea of an afterlife, but this afterlife plays along the idea that you are a life in the form, and then the form goes, and what remains? The life that had always been here, the energy that had existed. In one instant you can see if the universe you're living in is the real one or not. And in an instant you can see its divinity by just seeing design here. There is something here, ladies and gentlemen. something that is the grander audience of our mind's evolution into a collective vastness. Our species is no little thing, but it is telling itself little stories. The world is being marketed to kids like a tragedy when they are raised to be laughing in the world. It should be a comedy, the story of the world. That means even though if we're approaching our annihilation, let's say like a meteor was to hit the earth, I would tell people you must laugh. You must laugh at the end because you have appreciated all. Because many comedians don't understand this. They just look at the surface of their jokes. But when somebody tells a joke and it makes another human being laugh, it's as if their observation of that concept reached 100% to an acceptable pattern that they could recognize to even generate humor, to generate a surprise of reality. Because let me tell you, like you could give a little kid like a cake, small cake, and then you could go bring a big cake and put it in front of the little kid, and the little kid would look at the cake and laugh, you know? Like I remember, like I'm Persian, and we have these family gatherings, and I would see like my cousins and stuff like that, my younger cousins, and so in some sense I would see how the human mind would approach form. And what occurs is that when you're a child, the world is not storified yet. You know, it's not filled with stories, you know, or a certain complex pattern of stories. Pretty much an ideologically sight-bound creature confronts the end when the character in any story meets the final cut. The director's position in movies can even said to be a sort of god of a god of Maya, god of existence kind of thing. When the director says cut, the stories of that world end. And so, in some sense, the creative position is to comprehend like there's a survival of stories. That's why people are educating themselves. They constantly want to be in a state where they can see what is important to advance. But they don't really study the relationships they believe in. Because my sense of wisdom, guys, I don't know, like if somebody comes and tells you, like, what is wisdom? I'll tell them it's a changing world in motion. That means you realize what am I saying? The temporary aspect of existence. You realize the end, and you gain honor to live consciously. That's pretty much how it's happened for years, you know? Think of your ancestors. At least one of your ancestors must have been a fighter, you know? And so you think about your lineage and you realize the fighter spirit that in some sense is imprinted in your DNA. For me, DNA is like tunneling through space and time. This genetic material that's just tunneling through space and time, its pattern. It's as if it has a DNA has a momentum in its evolution through generations. For me, I start off like this when I want to study the unknown aspects of existence. I first of all, I realize ego is just dead weight. So if you want to believe you're a certain idea right now, you totally can, but you're going to see tomorrow you'll totally have a different view on things. So what I'm telling you is don't worship ideas like idols, and at the same time recognize the value of observable design, because most of your world is observable design. And honestly, the reason why I feel society has reached a sort of epitome of its activities is that the psychedelic experience has been introduced. And the psychedelic experience, in some sense, is an experience that says you, by changing your mind, you change your world. So these guys who take, for example, psychedelic drugs, like in Canada, like there's even a psychedelic society. I saw it on Google, and I was like, whoa. And so what I'm telling you is that there are many people who want to alter their mind. And when they want to alter their mind, when they want to go on some journey, some adventure, is because they are bored of their knowledge. They're bored of what they know, and they just want to go see and know more. That means, I'll tell you, uh, there's like the problem with loneliness. It'll instantly go away if you completely get rid of the internet. Kids would just get so bored, and they'll eventually leave an environment. They would, rather than on their phone changing different worlds and seeing different stories, they would actually go live their own life story. And to live your own life story means you got to be able to recognize your individuality as a sort of value to the collective structure of the world where the character is moving in. So what I'm telling you, dear listener, is that your ideas of self, like whatever idea you have on yourself, is is in some sense codependent, and uh, it, it is it has a common relationship with oh man, how do I finish the sentence? You are the opportunity of a physical lifetime to realize where physicality is being observed. You will come to perhaps a conclusion many people in ancient mystical traditions had naturally arisen to, the honest ones. Mysticism is a path of honesty. If you feel guilty, you gotta clean, you gotta take off your shoes before you enter the temple of enlightenment. What that means is you gotta get rid of the past that is making you not act naturally in the future. And how you get rid of the past is realizing there is an attention on it. And when problems arise to you, like first study the problem, find a solution, but then ask yourself at the end of it all, why was the problem there? And I know that like perhaps a thought that has often like visited me has been a thought that, in some sense, says, what would the end of space and time look for a creature in space and time? Is it a crash into non-existence? What is the value? If there was a poet that could see beyond the eyes of life, what would those words be? And so we see in certain ancient traditions there have been attempts, but one can say the greatest attempt, an honest or true attempt of an ant under a rock to figure out why the human being is moving is futile. So for me, these talks can go as far as the world has stretched, as far as the world has expanded. The world expands by language, and it expands by theory. So our minds are connected to advanced communicator, advanced technology. We have access to all knowledge. At the same time, our personality cannot exist easily. Our personality cannot exist easily in the presence of all knowledge. That means, like, your cell exists because there is a body, whole body, that can consider an aspect to itself. So for me, you gotta find your you gotta not just listen to your objective heartbeat, but you gotta also listen to your subjective heartbeat. And what it means is, as much as you're a creature of matter, you're a creature of thought. And thought is pure attention all the time. It just gets diffused with ignorance. So you see, there is a war going on, in this manifestation, and this war is a war between natural forces. And one aspect of the nature of this universe, the way it moves itself, is that it was born in the empty, and it will return to the empty, right? And then there's an aspect of reality that was born of the infinitely full and will return to the infinitely full. And in some sense, people think they have free will, but they are just a subtle maneuverance of energy to, in some sense, like you are an attention. You are an edgeless attention. You can choose whether you feel temporary or eternal. That's up to you to choose. That's part of your preference. It's like what kind of jacket you want to wear. You know, whether you call yourself a temporary being or an eternal being. But the notion comes that there has been a path towards enlightenment to a reverse engineering to find the origin of conceptual truth. And when you go to find the origin of conceptual truth, you come to the conceptual self that has even created a world for there to be a truth. And once the final world has disappeared, then truth remains unquestionable. Do you see? So what I mean by that is that you become a creature of attention, as if it's like your whole life you felt your body that's been howling a mind. But in this state, you kind of feel like you're your mind, you're your whole moment, and the body is an aspect of this moment. And your senses are in some sense a portal between worlds. I talked to a friend today, you know, and I noticed. Okay, here, let me say it like this. It's wise to find your natural self, and your natural self is how you are present as an intelligence unconditionally. Unconditionally means the free will is no longer a slave to the story of its life. Your free will becomes an attention of momentary value. Your moment is felt as energy, as if you see a part of your intelligence as just attention and a part of your intelligence is energy. And as these two waves are in some sense colliding, in between starts the story of the visible universe. Through communication, one can attain a sort of liberation. I'm saying a sort of freedom. Because in the engagement and the evolution of your free will, so think of it this way: you're a creature in a world. What's the best thing you can do in the world? Just see where the world is going at first, and then wonder what to do with a world that's spinning in the middle of nowhere. You choose your allegiance because there will be those who will not, who, there will be those who do not. Chaos and order will be standing in the same room as they always have. We can't change this dimension, but we can um, remember ourselves beyond it. Eyes are open and you're just taking in a moment of form. And then you suddenly become hyper focused, and this hyper focus sense kind of reflects back into your own thoughts. So let me say it to the like this: that sometimes I've given talks where I've said something that has completely changed the meaning of the thought I had before by just saying it, by communicating it in a new moment. The moon asks the sun, "Is my light a lie?" In other words, the moon tells the sun, me thinking my whole life that this is my light, it is actually your light, you know? Is it? And that's when the sun says, we are not the light. We are the presenters of it. Symbols appear to remind us that we disappear. But what is the value of life in a changing world? In a world that life treats every person in accordance to the world they see. Love matter, love it, don't get attached to it, but love the visible universe and be wondrous of how your mind is standing in the moment. You will ultimately see the concept of all these enlightenment gurus back in ancient history, everywhere around the world. I'm generalizing now, right? They're all them who acted holy and divine. Oh my God. Those guys forgot to tell you, look in the mirror and you'll figure out where God came from. Or you'll figure out where God is. Look in the mirror, and stare in your eyes, and you can formulate any question, but a part of your intelligence will be fascinated of its existence. So for me, there's a Tao to every moment. There is a rhythm to every moment. And when people gather around, the subjective intensity, the subjective energetic existence of those people, it begins to amplify. We don't realize it, but language is a simulation. It is a simulation in a world. Language is a world in a world. That's what I'm saying. And so I'm saying we have all our ancestors have been living in this inner world of this world. It's as if you are alive 100 years in this life. You look at it and you're like, what the heck? What is this? You see, it's a pattern of design, as if whether we like it or not, we can see the gears of biology and nature occurring. Time waits for no one, even though when we go to the doctor's office and it's our appointment, we gotta wait an hour before. It's as if like Father Time of some sort of mythology went to the doctor's office, and the god of time went to the doctor's office and had to wait and was like, what is this? I'm the god of time. Something also worth mentioning is the notion of archetypes. I don't know how many people know about this idea. The concept of archetypes is that your personality, your subjective self, administers itself just like how the physical universe back in the day, they looked at it, they said it's made of four elements, five elements, fire, water, earth, air, and ether, space. So these five elements made the physical universe. Like I'm saying, for your subjective universe, which is orbiting around a sense of subjective self, that subjective self animates itself through a series of archetypes. And archetypes are stories of the world you have accepted so far. Your archetype could totally be something that like it doesn't have to be just like ancient archetypes, but it doesn't just have to be what media shows you. Sometimes your eyes have seen it all before the show begins. Sometimes you recognize in solitude you get to see the pure self. And the pure self is a moment of confrontation in the battlefield between the known and the unknown, in the garden between the known and the unknown. Honest communication begins to heal social ignorance. In honest communication, playfulness arises. Playfulness must be blind to one thing to completely have its attention absorbed in one thing. So, in one sense, our happiness is it requires some authorization to guide it. Okay, so what I'm saying is that the young child playing, outside, the parents are right there, like a meter away, looking at the child. The child is in its own bubble universe, experiencing that moment. At the same time, the parent is just looking. In ancient wisdom cultures, and especially in the Vedic tradition, ancient Indian culture, they had this metaphor, and this very profound metaphor. And it was this metaphor that you look at, like, there's this tree, and on the bottom branch of this tree, there is a bird that is working hard. This bird, from the moment, like when we look at this bird on this branch, it's just moving and just building a nest and feeding its children and doing all that bird stuff it needs to do. On top, on the top branch, there is a bird that is just silent and still and has never moved. This idea was a suggestion. This idea was a suggestion that the two aspects of yourself, the chaos that leads to silence and stillness, the order that leads to movement and noise. You have two brain hemispheres. That means your brain is divided into two motivations. One towards the exploration of existence, and the other into the appreciation of current existence. That means some people like to read sci-fi novels, some people don't. Very simple. Some people want to stay in the comfort of the story of the world rather than allow the story of the world to evolve to provide perhaps even greater comfort for future generations. The problem is dishonest representation. And dishonest representation means we create simulations within simulations, and people never know what the real thing is. Language becomes, once mastered like martial arts, becomes a brush in the hand of a master painter. And this master painter moves the brush with the ebbs and flows of the universe, of the universal moment, that you are choosing your identification with the language of your world. You're choosing to accept language. And believe it or not, your thought is language. Your thoughts are language, pretty much. You don't understand like how much of, like, as a child you start self-dialogue and then you move into other things. And what I mean by that is that, like, have you seen in movies there's a guy who's scared, and the guy who's scared about to die, he's just constantly, or like that guy who's trying to cross the bridge and he's constantly doing this affirmation for himself. It's like, don't look down, don't look down, don't look down. Like, you see how that guy is speaking to himself in that moment, because his sense of self is orchestrated with his community, is has a relationship with his expression ability. So how well you can express yourself suggests how well the deeper aspects of your consciousness perceive the self. And then a breeze shall move along a green field, and a civilization has evolved experientially aligned, and experiences are just what is beyond stories. experientially aligned. We are in awe of the unknown to keep seeing the show. And to care for the world, that's you start off with caring for your own world, and then as your own world cares for the actual world, it begins to reclarify itself. You see life as it is. Heaven and hell become just images. You are an advanced communicator and you don't know it yet. Our whole species is. Just look at us compared to all other creatures. Just like one creature is still jumping from branches, the other creature evolved to a point where he drew a picture of like the Mona Lisa or something. A monkey that painted itself in a higher light, in a higher vision of the world, the intelligence began the story of the world. Thanks for listening. Much blessings and namaste.